Welcome to the Lions
The
Den.
one and only Leo.
Where we pour our man. Welcome to the Lions Den. Welcome to the Lions Den. Welcome to the Lions Den, where we pray for our fellow man. Come on, man, get your knowledge. To the Lions Den. Get the facts straight. To the Lions Den. And most importantly, to the Lions Den.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lion's Den. I'm Leo, and I just want to say thank you for joining me. And we've been talking about the pursuit of godliness, and the first thing I started on was stewardship and the stewardship of salvation. And then I talked about how this was going to be different in the roles of men and women, because there is a lot of similarities in the pursuit of godliness for men and women, but there's some key differences. And when it comes to stewardship, something I did not say is that men have a higher position in stewardship of the home. Now, when I say that, it's not to decrease that which the role that women have. It really is that men are held more responsible, and they are more accountable to the Lord for the things that they have been given to steward over and the things that they forget. Now, I'll put it to you. I'll give you a personal perspective of mine. Is my first marriage is a failed marriage, and as the steward, as the person who was supposed to safeguard the family, I'm the one who failed in that regard. And because of that failure, there are consequences that I, as a father, I'm putting up with. Why? Because I'm raising my sons in a broken home environment. They don't have a full nuclear family. We're making it work, and there's a lot of patchwork that was done by the grace of God. That work was done, and it was because of Him that we actually can all have at least some form of a relationship, and that we do have communion. I do have a good relationship with my sons. However, they struggle with me not having had been around as much as I should have. That's something that I, as a father, am going to have to hold into account, as well as to the damage I caused in my marriage in and of itself. That will also, I have to give account to that. I'm responsible for that. So it's being more responsible for the mess than anything. So as a man, I actually have more accountability and more responsibility to the tasks at hand, and I have to give an account to God in that respect as His steward. And in that case, I was an unfaithful steward, and a bad one at that. And so because of that, I have to give an account. Now, by the grace of God, I've been given an opportunity to have a second marriage and to try being a husband that is godly, and through that, and I think that's beautiful that God does that. That shows, that's a great illustration and presentation of His mercy and His grace at work in my life and in the lives of those I've seen go through very similar situations. But still, as men, we still have an obligation to the, how do I say this, to, as men who pursue godliness, now the things we know, we still are responsible and must give an account to those things. But praise the Lord that in our imperfection, He is the one who is doing a perfect work. So I just wanted to set the record straight on that. And then yesterday I spoke a little bit about, I spoke really pretty heavily about the fact that as fathers, we have a role to seek, that men have to be more they have to make their pursuit of godliness more presentable and less private. It actually has to be something that as men we must pursue. And we must pursue it in not just in our instruction, but also in our behavior. We need to show our children that we pray. We need to show our children our struggles. We don't have to give them details, but we do have to show them that how we deal with our problems when we go before the Lord, and how it is that we acknowledge His sovereignty, and yet we have to remember our responsibility. We're not going to sit back and say, well, if God's going to make everything okay, then I'm just going to sit around and do nothing. That is irresponsible. And that level of irresponsibility will only breed more consequences. That level of sin will only continue to bleed out more. Though God does his work, more consequences are laid out, more disaster than necessary in that case. So again, for more information, you can just watch the last two. But remember, I am going after the role. Now, I am going right now towards godliness in the workplace, and there is a difference between godliness for men in the workplace than there is for women. Like I said, there's many similarities, many. Like just even in this regard, there's many similarities about men and women pursuing godliness in the workplace. But there's distinct things that as men we have to be very mindful. Why? Because our overall temperament is very different from that of women. And like I'll say it like this: men are far more aggressive. We take things, believe it or not, men take things actually far more personally than women do. Men kind of conduct their business as far as like when there's something wrong out in the open. They're a lot more abrasive in the workplace. And how do you pursue godliness is different in regards of how it is that, again, we behave. Our pursuit of godliness is always pursuing the same thing, and that is to be more like our God. We do that in prayer. We do that in our Bible study. We do that in our fellowship, and we also do it in our outreach. But the most important thing, especially when it comes to the workplace, is how do we do that respectfully as men? Women, I believe it's a little bit different, because women, I will say it, women actually carry a little bit more respect in the workplace. And in times when they hadn't, they put their foot down. And I can say that the feminist movement had its positives and its negatives. And one of its great positives is setting equality in the workplace so that there is a respectful environment. One of the negatives that it conducted in the workplace is that it made it seem as though there's a competition in the workplace between the sexes, when in reality there's when the competition really should be on the merit of the work. So we have it's kind of like my take on affirmative action. I believe that merit does matter, but then there are some things that, you have to understand. Maybe a difference of opinion could be something that can be seen as slightly more meritorious. It'll be that one little click above the gear that raises you up. If you have two people that are even, but you have another that one other person has a different experience in life and has probably, then you start looking at character in that regard. So I think when it comes to work ethic, a lot of people, especially today, don't really have it. But let's say you do have a good work ethic, and then you're with somebody else who has another good work ethic. Well, then you start judging character, and then from character, you can actually gather that there are some differences, and that's the diversity of people, because you can have, two different, like let's say I'm a Hispanic male. You can have two different Hispanic males competing for the same job, but let's say, I've kind of my experiences, I would really offer nothing real. Like, let's say that in what I do, in the work that I present, there's no originality to it. It's kind of like, I'm just doing the work. I'm not really bringing, and I'm just another grinder. Well, then maybe we want somebody who's innovative in the higher position, somebody who actually has new ideas and nuance to the workplace, and that other gentleman has it. Well, then, I would say, hey man, good on you for being able to do that, because then they would be somebody who brings more to the workspace. It's in that regard. But here's what godliness does in the workplace. Godliness kind of removes the competition that we have amongst each other. That's the truth of it, especially men. Men are far more competitive than women in the workforce. Can I say that women are far more political in the workforce? I can say yes. Women are far more political in the workforce than men, but that is because women they're passive in how they want to pursue things in a way where they don't want to be perceived negatively, whereas a man can be a little bit more aggressive in his competition. So what do we say here? Like, see, there, that's how you find that there's differences in the role, and so there has to be different effects in the pursuit of godliness that allows the man in the workplace to still be respectful, mindful of his employers, of his employees, and of his fellow coworkers. It's not just being nice to the people up top because they're going to give you a promotion. It's not being nice to the people on the bottom because you remember where you come from. It's not being nice to your coworkers just so that you can have peace within the workplace. But being able to do all of that while pursuing God, for a man, that's very different than it is for a woman in that respect when it comes to our overall behavior. So I'm going to go ahead and put up Ephesians chapter 6. Now, it'll come up eventually. Please forgive me. I don't know why. I must be having issues with my connection right now. Come on. If that doesn't work, then I will go ahead and try it a different way. Give me a sec, guys. Here you go. Technical difficulties right off the bat, right now, Hold on. Ephesians chapter 6. I'll go ahead and put verse 1 here. All right. Let's see. Nope, it's still not in. So what I'm going to do here is something a little different. I'm going to share. Well, no, that's not working either. Hold on. Bear with me. Here I go. No, that's still not coming up. All right. So let's see how that looks. Make sure it's readable. Oh, I'm having issues with screen sharing today. Am I really going to be having this issue? Oh, no, wait, here. There we go. Okay, so, all right, hold on. So that's happening. Let me then actually make this a little bit bigger. I'm just using a different machine that I have a better connection with. That's all. The other machine's not doing what it's supposed to do. And that happens. But it's okay. We don't panic here, right? There's no panic in the kingdom of heaven. Only when it's me, right? Only when it's me. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and actually disconnect this service because it's not working. Give me a second, guys. And there you go. Yeah, I think this other machine that I'm using, I can see a little bit of a lag spike on my network here. That's one of the beauties of StreamYard is that I'm able to do work like this all the time. I can find a way around it. So again, if you're looking at trying to get something that works for you and you're trying to podcast or you're trying to do little instructional videos or maybe you're having a webinar, click on the link below. You get to StreamYard. You sign up for a $25 a month service. You're going to get a $10 credit on your first month. And I'm telling you, you're going to enjoy it so much. You're actually going to continue service. I love it. It works so great. All right. So boom, there it is. This is my machine right here. And let's go ahead and let's read it. Bond servants, be obedient to those who are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling. See, love that right there. In sincerity of heart. Right there. That's the second one. And here's the third one. A lot of people try to combine those two and then put here because of the word as, but believe it or not, in service to Christ. So it would be like bondservants, be obedient to those who are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, in sincerity of heart, in service to Christ. That's how you would have to read that sentence. Now, let's continue. Not with eye service as men pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with good will doing service as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that whatever good anyone does, he will receive the same from the Lord, whether he is a slave or free. And you, masters, do the same things to them, giving up threatening, knowing that your own master also is in heaven, and there is no partiality with him. I would just go ahead and reference Matthew chapter 18 when when Jesus talks to Peter about the unforgiving or the wicked servant. Don't be that. Just remember that, and we can. Give me a second. I'm having issues again. I can't help myself, can I? Yeah, can't help myself again. So that's basically what that like for that part right there with the masters, going back to that set of services to show that God actually holds the masters in, like, again, because they're stewards of the workforce, and as stewards of the workforce, they are responsible for what happens, and in that how the workers are treated. And in this case, I thought there were a few little interesting things. And again, I'm going to try to make this as short as possible, but I can't make any guarantees. Here we see in as we continue here, we see a few lines here. With fear and trembling, in sincerity of heart. Now, the sincerity that it's talking about there or the sincerity of heart, is basically when we pursue godliness, and especially in the workplace, we cannot expect that every single time we have a we do a good job as unto the Lord, then all of a sudden that means you're going to be promoted within like a week, or that's going to mean that you're going to get a pay raise, or that means that you're going to get something out of it. In our pursuit of godliness, just like for our children, when I was talking about it, you're not raising your children for your legacy. You're raising your children for the glory of God. You're pointing them in that direction. You are giving your children over to God, and you're instructing your children in the ways of the Lord, so that when that time comes, you will see and they will see everything that you taught them, and it will be and the reality of God is there. That's why I don't think that if you're just somebody looking for good morals, you shouldn't just walk into a church and carry on the morality of the church and then expect your children to do the same. They won't. Because the church's foundation is on Jesus Christ, and if you don't believe, then your children won't believe, and because it will build a rebellion there. So then, here in the same regard, sincerity of heart means that you have to be honest with yourself, and then it says here and not in service of men, not being a man pleaser. In other words, stop expecting something out of doing a good job for God in the workplace, in your home, in everything. And especially in the workplace, a lot of people get very dissatisfied with where they sit in the workplace, as if, I'm either being underutilized, or I'm not fitting in where I am, or I know I could do more, or I know I'm really more fit to be the manager than the manager who is the man. Listen, the person that God has over you is the person that God has over you. And that should be enough for you to say, yes, Lord, your will, not mine. And it's very difficult. And I'll tell you, I've stuck my foot in my mouth, and I've done and said some things before, and I've used to feel that way. I used to feel like I was, when I felt, you know what, I am where I need to be. But and it's funny because as soon as I started kind of feeling that way at work, God instructed me that I couldn't stay. And I felt really bad about leaving one of the jobs I left. It was probably the best job I ever had. And I walked away from it out of just, and a lot of people were like just crazy. They thought it was crazy. I thought it was insane too. But you know what? I followed the Lord, and I had to do what I had to do. Because I'm sorry, I've been disobedient before, and it cost me a lot. I'm not going to do it again. So in that same regard, we have to be content where God has us. In that same idea that when we're working in the workplace, when we're doing things, like I don't do nice things for my kids so that they love me. I do nice things for my kids because my God is telling me to do nice things. Feed them, care for them, guide them, love them, comfort them, counsel them. Those are the things I'm called to do. But in the end, that all of that counseling and comfort and everything points them in the direction of Christ, points them in the direction of Jesus, shows them the beauty and the value of the cross, shows them the beauty and the purpose of grace and mercy and how it fits in justification. Those are the things we are called to do. So how do we do that in the workplace as well? Remember who's the person who gave you your job. It's not the manager who gave you your job. It's the Lord who gave you your job. It's not, I was able to work this out and that. God has and God is doing what he is doing with you in the workforce. He will have you where he has you, and you would be content in it. It's crazy because as soon as you find contentment, all of a sudden you can be either just like me. God tells you, no, you can't stay. Or you know what? Maybe he says the promotion comes. All of a sudden you get a pay raise. All of a sudden there are those good things that do happen. But those things aren't happening because you want them. Those good things are happening because God will bless you and he will honor your work. But at the same time, you're doing it for his glory. And if you do so, then you will find that you will work peaceably amongst your coworkers. You will work peaceably amongst your employers, and you will find great comfort in your employees that they can actually, they're still able to teach and do for you, and you all help one another. Your performance is not going to, don't believe that your performance gives you something. Do what you must do for the Lord. Everything else takes care of itself. Pursue him. Pursue godliness. That's the key. That's the value. That's what we're supposed to be about as Christians. And we forget it. We pursue everything else. We pursue our legacy through our children. We pursue our kingdom, our molehill of a kingdom with all of our possessions. We fill our minds and we use our workplace as a trophy room. Then how are we any different from the world? It does beg that question. So when we're pursuing godliness, the fruit of the Spirit must show. I like the fact that it talks about the relationship of the workplace environment and then goes straight into the armor. I thought Paul couldn't have penned that any better, because he goes from the thing that happens inside with the family to what's going on outside with the workplace, and then he's going even further and saying that this is not an issue of company versus company or employer versus employee. This is about putting on the full armor of God, because this is a spiritual battle that happens all the time. As Christians, if we are pursuing godliness in the workplace, you will always have integrity. You will always exercise loyalty, because you know that the person that is over you is the person who God has appointed over you. You will exercise selfless service because you will be sacrificial, as Christ is the ultimate example of being sacrificial to an entire world that was hating him while he was giving himself up as a sacrifice. And yet we feel just a little, my boss doesn't like me, and I'm feeling the full persecution. Get out of here, please. There's the door, please. I don't want to hear it. I just can't. We as Christians in the workplace have to exhibit real Christian character. And we have to do it not so that we can promote the beauty of the church and so that people can start throwing roses at us and give their lives over to Christ. It's not a performance for them. It's not. It's a lifestyle for Him. That is the purpose of godliness in everything that we do. And when it leads into our workplace, when we are serving Him, when we are not hating on our coworkers, instead we are praying for our coworkers. When we don't detest our employers, instead we give them their due respect. And then when we look at those who are underneath us, not as though they are beneath us, but instead supporting us, it's a completely different worldview. It's a completely different perception, and that's a real Christian perception. And as Christians, that's how we have to see the beauty of the workplace, in how we can exemplify Christ in that our lives lived in the workplace faithfully towards God will preach a gospel as we live it, and then we will preach that gospel in the way we speak. Don't be out there cussing a storm at work. Don't be out there gossiping and lying and starting problems, and especially for men, because men like to take a more dismissive role when it comes to controversy. No, stand up. Let your yes be yes. Let your no be no. Don't just sit there and take beatings for the sake of taking beatings. Stand up for what is right. Because like I said, you're there by the grace of God, and by the grace of God, He can get you out. I had a lot of friends who were in workplaces where they did not agree with what was going on. And, I don't know if I should. Or if you're having a moral dilemma about where you're working, start praying to God, because if you can't be a force that works towards godliness in that workplace, and you're busy covering up their dirty deeds, you're just as you're an accomplice in their unethical and immoral behavior. So maybe you should think about not being that accomplice anymore. But I need this job. And that's when I tell them something that hurts them, and it hurts me. Well, you really need to pursue God. And it's a harsh thing to hear. It really is, especially in today where, bills are, our utilities are just going through the roof. Our credit card bills and our interest rates are climbing. Yes, it's getting harder. Going to the groceries is like, it's like, all right, hold on 1 second. I'm making my first grocery payment for the month. And I just go ahead and do that. I know it's difficult. But we've read a psalm not that long ago that says, I have never seen the children of God begging for bread. We have to trust fully in Him. What a great example we would be to our families when we stand up for what's right and pursue Him, because He's the one who guides us and guards us when we do right by Him. Now, what we do right, I don't know. I don't think that's the right thing. Well, you got to ask. I always affect the morals clause in this argument. Is it ethical? Is it legal? And is it moral? And if one of those is no, then you really have to question whether or not you're really pursuing the will of God. Like, I'll put it to you like this. Preaching the word, and let's say one day it is illegal. How do you perceive that? Well, it's illegal, so the answer is preaching the gospel legal? No. All right. Is it ethical? Yes. Is it moral? Yes, it's the moral thing to do. Well, because it answers those two questions, I understand there's a consequence. There's an actual legal consequence. I will be thrown in prison for preaching the gospel. but I'm not going to stop preaching the gospel. See, that's when we have to understand, like, does it glorify God? In our workplace, when you clock in, and you get caught in the routine of it, you kind of feel like, is there more to this? I'm not happy here. The question is, are you putting it in prayer? Are you letting others know to put it in prayer about your position in where you are at work and where you want to actually be? Pursue God. Pursue Him wholeheartedly in this. And here's this. Involve your family in it. Involve your family in that decision-making process. Not so that they tell you, don't do it. Are you crazy? You have health insurance. We can't afford to lose health. We're not doing that. We're asking God where He wants me. And if this is where God wants me, I have to pray that He can make me good with that. That He can fill my heart with contentment. And you'll find that actually as you pray, you'll have the contentment. It'll come because you're actually going to have you and your family involved in a discussion that involves God making a decision in your family's life. Pursue Him. One last thing before I go, and I know I said try to keep it under, but it just never. I blame it on technical difficulties. All right, here we go. Knowing that whatever good anyone does, right here in verse 8, knowing that whatever good anyone does, he will receive the same from the Lord, whether he is slave or free. Let me help you out. You're free. Your job is not indentured servitude. These people at this time were under they were under the authority of indentured servitude. Their masters had more rights, and the indentured slave really had none. So I'm not even going to say that the master had more rights. The master had rights, and the servant had none. In this case, in where you're at, guess what? You're not an indentured servant. You have rights. And these people learned to pay off their debt and still end up working for their masters. Because that's one thing that when you were an indentured servant, if you wanted to stay, then the master would, if once you're done, the master can say, well, you can leave. But most of the time they would say, we would like for you to stay, and they would offer you a wage. So most of the time they stayed for a wage. They were free. And so sometimes they'd be like, well, now I'm free. Now I can't. Now I have now as a free person, I have rights. God says it. Whether you're a slave or whether you're free, you have a certain way that you ought to behave that brings glory to Him in all that you do. And read it carefully right at the very beginning. With fear and trembling, in sincerity of heart, not with eye service as men pleasers, but as bond servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with goodwill doing service as to the Lord and not to men. We are called to be how He wants us to live, that we do the things that we do that bring Him glory, as if we were actually working for Him. Like He's the one who has to submit our quarterly review. He's the one doing it. It's Him. So pray that that you're doing that. Read the Word of God so that we know how we need to act in our workplace environment, and involve your family in it. Man, I'm telling you right now, involve your family in it. You know how many men suffer from depression because they don't talk to their family members. They don't talk to their children. They don't talk to their wives. They don't talk to their own parents. about all of the things that they're going through in their life because they are either ashamed or because, in reality, they're too proud to have that discussion. There is a reality that I love it when people used to say it all the time. Now they don't say it anymore. A family that prays together stays together. I love the reality of that statement because it is so true, and yet it is so never done. It's crazy. We used to say it all the time, and yet we would barely ever do it. And when we prayed, it was about, oh, let little Susie get good grades in school. Oh, let Johnny, stay out of trouble. There's so much more we really need to be praying for. And there's so much we can involve each other in. If we would just be honest with our family members and everybody would be praying. The prayer of a righteous man avails much. And gentlemen, we need to be godly men so that our prayers can start availing something. Stop looking for excuses. Men are isolating themselves. The whole idea with this whole manosphere, it's still isolating men. We're not called to be isolated. We are called to live in community with each other as men and with our families. We need to be more like his church and less like this world. All the answers that they offer are all the same. They only offer, in the end, an isolated man who is insulated from all rational thought. And instead, we need to pursue the Lord, and we need to do it together. And when we go into the workplace, we need to remember we wear the robes, we wear the signet ring. When we punch in, when we punch out, and when we do our job, it's not my supervisor looking over my shoulder. It's my God and my Lord, my Savior and my King. And if we remember that, then I believe you'll appreciate your job just a little bit more. And when you involve your family in praying about the things that you're going through at work, let them know. You don't have to get, like I said, you don't have to get super specific, but just some general detail. Let them know so that they can pray for you too. So that you can be what? You can be held up. And then do this with other men and other families. Oh no, and then what do you have? A church. Mind blown. That's it. It's over. I've dropped some knowledge. We should already know this. Let me say it again. We should already know this. And we have fallen away from the idea of being able to, as men, band together and do so with our families and our workplaces in mind. Don't forget. In the end, everything that we do, as it says here, must be done as unto the Lord.